And we are live for another excellent episode of First Strike Podcast. Before we start the show, I got to plug our sponsor, FaceToFaceGames.com, the #1 place to get your Magic the Gathering singles. This week's special, 10% off all foils. So go to FaceToFaceGames.com today and get them foils. On today's show, we got Elliot, Andy, Derek. John's busy, but we got Derek in the house, back from Mythic Championship, London. Kind of sad that he sort of prophesized how his tournament was going to go, not only weeks, probably months ago, and it was just bad. I felt bad there. My heart was hurting with your early exits, early demise. But let's go straight to you. Let's go to before the tournament. How was testing with Team Face-to-Face games?
Maybe I have a weird expectation for how testing should go, and I think that has to do with the way I play Magic in general. But I found that, and this isn't a slight towards face-to-face at all, it was just not very concentrated. Not that I've really been with a testing team that's ever really been concentrated. I voiced this concern before, and the majority of the Morgan, Edgar, and Gabe said that it's partially because it's a modern pro tour. It's partially because it's a new draft format that we didn't actually get to play, and it's partially because of the open deck list things and it being in London. So there are so many unique circumstances about this MC specifically that made it very different than I guess what I expected and what they were used to doing. So the actual testing process was a little bit more scattered than normal. As for just hanging out and working with them, it was pretty sweet. They're all smart and good players. It's you have a group full of platinum and gold pros that are just crushing the scene. So I think I learned a bit, and definitely got to communicate well with them and focus on my I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, connections. So that was certainly exciting, but I think we fell short a little bit of the actual concentrated testing process.
But you ultimately ended up with Is It Phoenix, and our man John has compiled some of the data based on the performance of many archetypes in the tournament, and it seemed to be popular behind Tron, and it did well. It had an over 50% win rate. So did you feel confident with your deck? I assume you played Is It Phoenix?
Yeah, I felt confident with my deck choice. I didn't play a real game of Constructed Magic, I don't think, between the match loss and then I got kind of unlucky the next two rounds to lose. So I don't know. The whole tournament was not really a real showing of how I felt that how I prepped or anything. It's hard to explain without just me saying that I think I got unlucky, but I don't know. It was just a bad tournament for me, and I would run it back with everything. Is it Phoenix? Whatever. So yeah.
Well, what would you have liked to do for let's say you're qualified for the next Mythic Championship in terms of testing? Was it the Constructed that was a bit scattered, which is limited? Was it everywhere that wasn't organized for you?
Definitely the limited thing, but I think that was out of our control. I think that one of the biggest things we could work on for next time, if I was requalified, was focus on matchups specifically. We had 4 people on the team who were playing blue-white who had different blue-white deck lists, which just shouldn't really happen, right? You should all sort of come to a conclusion based on what deck list you're playing and why it's the best. I think there's an objective way to decide what deck list you should be playing. I think Morgan and Edgar knew they were going to be playing Amulet no matter what. I think it's possible they should have had more practice against specific archetypes or against specific game states or turn sequences or circumstances in matchups. And I would have really liked to sort of stress test different cards and sideboards. And we didn't test Tron, and we didn't just say I mull the 5 with Tron every single game. Like that wasn't a thing we did, and I think that would have been useful or helpful, as Tron was one of the highest represented decks in day 2. I think there's 2 or 3 copies in top 8, or like with humans, like trying to stress test a human deck to see what the best build is and so forth. Like Javier Dominguez also had a gut shot in his deck. Like if we decided that humans was a good deck, like maybe I should have put a gut shot in my main, sort of thing, right? Like these things we sort of fell short on just because we weren't putting in the effort to find out what the line was or what the best deck list to be was, I think.
I'm not afraid to fire shots if it's my buddy Shaheen. Was he too strong on his blue white stuff, Derek?
I think so. Between Nassif and Shaheen, if you gave them any reason to even talk about blue white, they were all over it. So when I can't remember his name off the top of my head, one of the Michigan guys won with Esper, it was sort of like it sparked the fire in them to be like, maybe blue white's good. And then you have them playing it on Moto. Zach Allen, who he's the one that won with Esper. You have them just playing on Moto with blue white, and Nassif is like doing well with it on stream and like coming to these conclusions. And you have Edgar on the other side of the spectrum just being like, this isn't a blue white format. Like this blue white is not a powerful deck enough for modern. But between like Nassif and Shaheen, they were just like deep down the rabbit hole playing blue white. And credit to them, like I think Shaheen ended up doing okay, but I think Pete definitely said he wouldn't play blue white again, I think, for the next one that he's qualified for. So I don't know how they con themselves into playing blue white, but whatever.
Yeah, he had a good start. Even got either a deck tech or an interview. I don't remember after on near the tail end or in the middle of day 1, as he had gone off to a good start. Shaheen, that is, and I was happy for him. Expected him to play blue white, of course. So I'm looking at the graph that John was kind enough to make for us. Cheerios, number 1 win percentage, number 2 ad nauseum. Of course, like 2 people were on Cheerios, so that doesn't really mean much. It just means a lot more when a lot of people were on it. So like humans doing really well with quite a few people piloting it. Like you mentioned, Derek, like who knew humans might have been a big player, and we had Isa Phoenix up top. So looking at this stuff, Elliot, what does this tell you about what happened in terms of modern?
In terms of modern, I think it was pretty much what we called on the show in the weeks leading up, and I don't know if anything really came out and shocked people. I wouldn't think. I think that the mulligan rule proved to be like, pretty tame. A lot of people were saying it's the end of days when they announced the change for the Pro Tour, saying that all the degenerate decks are going to crush. And Cheerios had a high win rate for the couple people that played it, and Ad Nauseum was up there again with 8 pilots and like a 62% win rate, which is very good, but just not a large representative sample size. And it probably speaks more that Cheerios and Ad Nauseum were decks that people leapt to when the rule change was announced, and the fact that you only ended up with 10 pilots between the 2 decks is probably pretty telling of people's testing leading up towards the event, that these degenerate decks trying to abuse the mulligan rule really aren't what we're going to be seeing in modern if the rule does come into effect. And I think it will. I think the rule is like totally fine. I think maybe there's a cost to be paid in vintage, but who really cares? And for the other less powerful formats, maybe Legacy has some issues with it. Again, I personally don't really care, but modern and down, it seems great. And in terms of the results, again, the decks that try to abuse mulliganing Cheerios ad nauseum, the Chalice of the Void Eldrazi decks, they just didn't perform. They didn't have the same success that decks that tried to just improve the quality of a 5 or 6 card hand did. You know, you look at the deck that won Humans and some of the other decks in the top 8, like Tron, is when you get down to a 5 card hand, there's a really big difference between, you know, if you can just change 1 card. A Human's hand with 2 spells and 3 lands on 5 is very bad. No kidding it. But you know, if it's 3 spells and 2 lands, all of a sudden you have a game plan. You're cooking. So I think that those are the decks that really gained the most from this, and it kind of went under the radar, at least in the public eye until now. And I believe the results show it. It won the Pro Tour.
On the subject of the mulligan, it was interesting to see different people have different opinions, different pros, notable pros. It seemed like Ari Lax wasn't impressed with the rule, but then we had Ben Stark, who had this tweet in a shocking twist after playing with the London mulligan for 2 days in the MC and only confirmed what I already felt the past month. This rule is amazing. This rule needs to be permanent and put on arena immediately. I don't want to play one more game without it. And I talked to my good buddy Alex Hayne, who ended up top 4ing the MC, and he felt that in limited he won a lot more on Multi-5 and saw other players winning more on Multi-5. So a lot more games were played. And Andy, I know you are sometimes really passionate about certain rule changes, and this is one of them. It feels like you're really for and see no downside.
Yeah, I thought it sounded pretty good at first, but was like a little skeptical of the more powerful formats, just as everyone else. But then I loaded up Magic Online and started playing Standard with it, and I was like, I've mulliganed to 5, and I don't feel that far behind. Or like I've mulliganed to 6, and it didn't really matter that much at all. Like I just got to put back the least functional card in my hand. And so I think the rule is incredible for limited and for constructed or for standard. And I think it's fine in modern. Like it doesn't break anything. It doesn't make anything too terrible. And for the rest, I don't know what it's going to do. And much like Elliot, I don't exactly care that much, especially vintage. It's casual. Maybe they could have a separate rule. They already have restricted cards and weird rules. So maybe it's like more okay to have a weird rule for that format. But I think overall it's awesome. It's a very good change to me. I think more games of Magic get to be played. And if like the major downfall is that more people choose to play Tron, that's okay.
Derek, as someone who was playing in the tournament, what's your opinion about the mulligan rule?
I think the mulligan rule was really good. Played it on Moto for a bit. I think it makes the game a little less random, and it obviously makes your decisions matter a lot more. So when you do mulligan, it's a lot more up to your decision to make the right choice compared to how your cards lay out and how, like what you're scrying to the top. So maybe it came up, and this also with the deck list thing, I think was pretty unique. Playing Phoenix, like there's a couple times I mulliganed, I mulled the 6, and there was like the 2 cards I could push was Bolt or Surgical, and like more often than not, Bolt is better than Surgical. But keeping the Surgical if I'm playing against Dredge or if I'm playing against some other graveyard deck, like it's really important to know that. Whereas if the top card is like Surgical or the top card is Lightning Bolt, like it changes how your game actually plays out. And I think that making that decision adds less randomness and adds more skill to the actual game. And I do know that they let us know that for Barcelona, they will be using the London mulligan rule again to try to get more data. They sent us an email before London saying that they would be doing it for both, and then seeing where it goes from there. And I don't know if the people at home saw, but during the matches in the actual MC, they had these little pieces of paper that you're supposed to write down who went first, who went second, how many times you mulliganed, and who won the match on the player draw. So you'd like write down both players' names, circle, this person went first, won game 1, lost game 1, or lost game 2, won game 3 sort of thing, and then how many times you mulliganed on each game. So they're doing a series of things to collect data and try to figure it out. I hope that is good enough. I really like the rule. I hope they continue with it.
What are you, if you were qualified, if Barcelona was tomorrow, does that change, does the tournament change your willingness to just bring old reliable? Is it Phoenix?
I mean, if it was tomorrow, I would just bring Phoenix. There will be an entire, like, Modern Horizons, I think, will be out by then. And, like, I think that this set really affects Modern currently, specifically with the London Mulligan, which is, I think, something we might get to later in the show. So if it was tomorrow, Phoenix. But even for the mocks, like, I don't know what I will be playing in Modern because of the cards that have been added to the set. I was going to wait a week or two to figure out to see if they were going to say anything. I know the mocks is the Vancouver Mulligan rule, which is the Scry effect. So there's hopefully no shenanigans there. But I do know there are some cards in the new format, specifically like 3-mana Saheeli, that a lot of people have been talking about coming up for specifically is it Phoenix deck. So yeah, if it was tomorrow, I'd bring Phoenix. Barcelona, I don't know. It's hard to say.
To wrap up, to wrap up part of this, the Modern talk. This Twitter account was really interesting. Tweeting out, "I'm quitting Magic." Hate Magic, love the Gathering. 1-3, I misread the pairing sheet. I was 182. I read 187 and sat in 187 and played 2 games. Played 2 games. Then a judge came over, told me player in 182 and I were in the wrong seats and would be getting match losses due to the 10-minute tardiness rule. And shout outs to Canister for tweeting out actually misplaced Ginger. So in this edition of What Happened, Derek, what happened?
So, like you said, it's after the draft. It was there's a lunch break for those who don't know, and I finished eating and walked over to the pairings board, misread the pairings. And the one unique thing about this round is round 4 was the round we didn't get deck lists. Every other constructed round in the event, you get deck lists. And maybe I'll say something about that afterwards because it's sort of weird that happened. But so for round 4, if you've never played at a PT, it just has your table number and your name. And they do just the table number and your name and not your opponent's name, so you can't scout their name. It used to be on a giant scrolling screen, but for this event, it was just on a piece of paper on a board like you have at a GP. So I go and sit down, talk to my opponent. Normally, once again at a GP, you see your opponent's name and you say, "Oh, you're this," or "Hi, I'm this. Nice to meet you." And sometimes you'll be like, "Oh, my opponent's supposed to be named, I don't know, Elliot." And it's like, "Oh, well, I must be in the wrong seat then." And you go back and you check. There was no name, so you didn't know. Not only that, but when I was sitting in this spot, nobody had come to say anything. Like sometimes when you sit in the wrong, I've sat in the wrong spot at a GP before, and somebody would be like, "Hey, I think you're in my spot. One of us should go recheck the pairings." Nobody else checked. So it was Alan Wu who sat in the wrong spot at 182, my spot, and I sat in his spot. We just so happened at the exact same time sit in the wrong spot at the wrong round with our opponents not knowing our names and not having any deck lists. And he actually won his match 2-0, I think.
Yeah, So I heard this story live because it was my coworker that Alan Wu played against and Derek was supposed to. So I get a message and it's like, "Elliot, I'm so lucky. I just got paired against Alan Wu and I got 2-0'd so fast." And then we go to sign the match slip and I'm playing against Derek Pitty.
So I get paired against this guy that I think follows me on Twitch, and he introduced himself, and we were talking, and he beats me at game 1, and we're in game 2, and I'm sideboarding, and we're in turn 4 of game 2. And I can see the judge behind my opponent with this confused look on his face, like looking around. He goes, "What's your name?" I'm like, Derek Pite. He goes, picks up the match slip. He's like, yeah, you're in the wrong spot. Hands me the match slip. It says Alan Wu on the match slip. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you were supposed to be at 182. And then like takes a step back, and I can see him like the next table over, like looking over with this like sort of like glazed look on his face. Like he couldn't believe what was happening. And he's like, yeah, you're both getting a match loss. I was just like, sorry? And he explains it again. I'm like, no, I heard you. What? And he says it again. Okay. And I just like put my hand on my head like, this is the Pro Tour. And I just got a match loss at the same time as Alan Wu, who won a Pro Tour for sitting in the wrong spot. And I'm like, can I appeal? The head judge just comes over and says the same thing. And I'm like, this is unreal. You know what? I don't care anymore. I'll take my match loss. And yeah, I was just, I was blown away. Just couldn't believe it. It was.
It's a great story, though. It's a great story.
I told it to so many people, and they're like, dude, that's really unlucky. And I'm like, I know, like, obviously I misread the pairings and I'm stupid, but like, what are the possibilities that happened at the same time, right? Like the one round where you don't know your opponent's name and it happens to like somebody else who's played Pro Tours a million times before also. It was just like, come on, like what are the chances? Like, why me,
Yeah, out of all of the people, it would be you that I would expect this to happen.
Right?
So good. So good. Top 8. I was rooting for Hayne, someone that I felt like hasn't, amongst friends or people I talk with, peers, I felt like he actually was starting to get underrated, was getting a reputation of a guy that just relied on his talent and was too lazy to put actual work, but actually behind, hidden from people was the fact that he's been putting consistent results. I think I mentioned was the last episode where he's been one of the top players in the world consistently for the last 5+ years. It's just that he hasn't top 8, so hasn't seen the limelight and wasn't given the proper attention. Just was always just this close, missing worlds because of some tiebreaker. So it was really great to see him have a great start, which he hasn't had in a while. And I felt that I was pretty confident that he was going to close or get to the top 8 once he had that good start, and he managed to do that. Though it was kind of tense hearing that he was up against Shift in his first win in. He lost with Tron, and then he went up against I believe it was Hard Scale. I think Elliot said it was Hard Scale, and the match wasn't that great. It was like 40-60 according to Elliot or John, and I was starting to feel nervous, but he ended up getting there, so I was pretty happy. So he made it, and Tian Nguyen ended up making it. Tian was someone that, man, I wonder if Andy, Elliot, or Derek remember the controversy. I mean, this was when First Strike still had, I believe, Lombardi and Gottlieb on the show. The controversy of him being seen as a villain after he got his opponent to, like, his opponent called combat phase, wanted to attack with Heartless Kieran, but it was too late because it was like going straight to the declare attackers. So he had forgotten, I guess, to crew. Elliot, do you remember all the details of that? And if the ruling has changed since? I completely forget now what was the aftermath of that.
Yeah, I think I don't remember the exact details. I think he had the 1 red black 3/3 that let you pump an artifact creature, and I think he wanted to like go to combat, crew, and pump the creature, and he just skipped right ahead to the declare attackers and missed his trigger because of that.
Yeah, it used to be if you said combat, it was assumed that you were skipping through pre-combat, which is like when people like to use Cryptic Command, etc. And that's when that triggers. But if Heart of Kieran's not a creature in that phase, the 3/3 has no legal target. So what his opponent wanted to do was put the trigger on the stack and crew Heart of Kieran, but you can't do it in that order. So not only did he not understand the order, but he misspoke in what he wanted to do. And yeah.
Yeah, I also know that there was a language barrier involved. I think his opponent spoke Spanish primarily, didn't speak English fluently, so I thought it was an issue. But they have changed the rule. It was definitely relevant for when we have vehicles and standards as big role players. But now if you say go to combat, you're in beginning of combat, not declare attackers. So you still have the chance to crew your vehicle, and you don't get got by that as much. And I think it's a positive change, but it happened years ago. So
I remember like the public was, and I had just released, I had published a Tien article because he was known to play skip shift for a long time and having success with it. One of the he's one of those guys. Like when you're known for a certain deck, he was one of them. And he wrote me a deck guide. He was crushing, I believe, a bunch of tournaments, whether it be SUG or the GP. Then this happened, and he got a lot of bad public attention, made to be seen a villain. And now he wrote an article, and he addresses, he talks about his tournament, but addresses this. And it's kind of cool to get his take on it. And he said that like he hasn't given people his side of the story. And this was PT Dublin. And I encourage everyone to check it out. I mean, it caused him to have to step away from the game, and I couldn't blame him for that. And then he's made it back, sought out professional help, has a therapist now, and I think it just sounds like from reading the article, and Andy read it too, that he's in a good place right now, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled for him. Yeah, Andy, you got to check out the article, right? Andy just disappeared from the room somehow. Completely thrilled for Tien, and of course he played Scape Shift and ended up top 8ing, losing in top 8. Andy, I was asking you read the
sorry.
You read the article too, right?
Yeah, I did read the article, and it's an awesome article, really well written, and I think he really it's really honest about the events that transpired. And I can speak from experience as someone who's I've angle shot before in the past, and I've completely changed from that. And I think sometimes you kind of need to see why what you're doing isn't okay, even if it's within the rules. And sometimes it comes from there. You just kind of change your attitude towards everything. And I feel like that happened with myself. So I can really feel his story.
Right. I'm just going to read like a touch about it. I was playing to be undefeated at a Pro Tour. No win comes easy. People were telling me how I was despicable and how they would never do what I did at a Friday Night Magic. Of course I wouldn't do that at a Friday Magic, but I was playing for player statuses and invitations, and I invite anyone to go check out his piece. It's actually an awesome read. And of course, the big news was after the top 8, after my man Alex Hayne drew with Yuuya Watanabe, one of Andy's favorite players ever. That we found out some unfortunate news, and Andy, what happened?
So he was notified, but for round 14, Yuuya Watanabe was disqualified for a deck check on his sleeves that showed his cards were to be marked in a way that was basically there was little room for doubt that it was intentional, and he got disqualified. And he later posted the pictures of the sleeves on Twitter, which I'm surprised he did it because they are damning. It looks like he put his nail and pressed on it, and pressed on all the corners, and then pressed a different corner for different Tron lands. And it's a horrible thing to see. One of my favorite players, someone you look up to because they're fantastic, incredible results. Just almost like there's so little room for it to be anything but cheating. It's to say that it's not cheating, you have to grab at some really loose straws there, because it's just he cheated. He almost certainly had cheated to the point where it's almost impossible to say that he didn't cheat based on the evidence. And it sucks because he's one of my favorite players ever. Really looked up to him. I loved how humble he seemed. his Hall of Fame speech was super emotional for me. I loved it, and it made me feel a lot of things because of how much I love Magic, and he talked about that. And it sucks just to see one of your heroes just not be so good of a guy.
Elliot, like if they're marked, how do you suppose one uses that information to cheat?
So I think especially in a deck like Tron, there's a lot of like really simple ways to explain it, which is just like if you can look at the top card of your deck and know that it's an Urza's Mine. If your hand has a power plant and a Sylvan Scrying and an egg to crack, you know that you want to crack the egg right away to cast your Sylvan Scrying to draw the different Tron land. But if you're in a situation where maybe you have a mine already, you see there's a mine on top, and you have the option to cast a Sylvan Scrying first, then you don't want the duplicate Tron land. So if you have the information of what Tron land you're going to draw, then I think it gives you a big advantage. And I don't think anyone is saying that with Yuuya's bent corner sleeves, he's necessarily stacking his deck and manipulating it to make sure he's drawing the right one. But it's just the little advantage of knowing what Tron land you're going to draw, when you're going to draw it, help plan out your turns ahead, and just gain that advantage. It's the same thing where maybe he's deciding between Ancient Stirrings and Sylvan Scrying. If he knows that he's going to hit a Tron land off Ancient Stirrings, then he should do that first, because then he gets to guarantee the third piece off the Sylvan Scrying. So it's definitely not a good look.
Derek, what was the reaction there in real time?
It was weird because I didn't notice until I think it was John or Andy posted in our own group chat while I was standing in front of the stage, if you will, and they were trying to announce the top 8. And it's very weird if you've ever been in at a pro tour and you're watching them announce it. They have everything organized. They move all the feature match tables. They move all the chairs. They have people line up in front. They tell them to come around back into the sort of the shielded area, and Marshall's about to do the top 8, and then Xion runs over and sort of like tells him and gives him a piece of paper and says that he's been disqualified and that somebody's going to be squeaking into 8th, and it changes everything. And Marshall's like, oh, well, it was clean cut 30 seconds ago. What am I supposed to be doing? Like, do you want me to hype this up? And like, they're not talking about how they want to do it and how he wants to talk about it. Cause like, obviously it's a controversial topic, specifically for it to happen in like a matter of minutes or seconds. And it was weird. Like on the floor, you could see that people were talking about it and sort of like thinking about it. But like most people, I remember Marcus, who was on the show before, like called me over. He's like, hey, like read this. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Somebody sent me a message. He's like, that's insane. And he's standing with some of the other Vancouver guys, and they're just like can't believe it either. Like you're just blown away. It's you saw, like I saw Yuuya on the floor earlier. I saw him playing his matches. I saw him in the event, and he played against I think it was Mark Jacobson round 13 or something. And Mark posted on Twitter like, I lost to him, and he got platinum, but he lost his winning into Yuuya. And it's just you're thinking, what if he didn't cheat, or what if I got him that, or all these different things, right? So you just have all this emotions and people like reading this in real time, and then you see the announcers talking about it, and like Sperling walks out on stage in 8th with like this look on his face, and you felt that, it was wild. I think I hope I have it on video. My GoPro was almost dead when that was happening, so I'll have to check the video. But yeah, it was wild. It was insane.
I was kind of surprised how fast some of the Savage tweets were. Like Nassif, almost right away. Top 5 all time, looking a bit roomier. I was like, holy shit.
That supposedly that tweet, he was gonna say something else, and then Edgar said that one, and Nassif was like, oh, that's a good one. And yeah, that one was good though. I was in the Uber back, and I'm like, no way Nassif tweeted that. We got back to the Airbnb, It was a good one.
I think a lot of us were like, it's probably gonna get deleted soon, but no, it wasn't. And
Yeah, I
it's not going to.
screenshotted it for sure. I thought it was going to get deleted in a few minutes.
It's interesting that there's a lot of debate over like the whole people are comparing the Yuuya and Owen situation, stuff like that. It is sad that overall sad that 2 MPL members gone, dropping like flies, and but it opened the door for someone awesome, and Autumn Burchett took Owen's spot, right? If I'm not mistaken, yeah. And then don't know what's going to happen to Yuya's spot and stuff, if anything. Man.
At this rate, Derek's going to get in the MPL. So
something that I thought was interesting about it was that, like, the openness that like Rich Hagon, when he was explaining it during the broadcast, he just explained what Yuuya did, explained like exactly what was with the cards, and basically explained that it was almost certainly cheating. The judges determined that it was like almost impossible for it to be an error or for it to be wear on the cards. And I thought that openness and that like right away just like really hit it home that Yuuya's probably a cheater. And like that, this is like could be a moment of weakness, but it's like it gets even sketchier that he changed his sleeves in round 12 or whatever. So like once the biggest money games are on the line, right? These are like the win-ins, the penultimate rounds, and this is when he changes his sleeves and marks his cards. Like that makes it look so premeditated that it's hard to say that he has not done something similar before, like, or at least taken taken opportunities when he could see it, like opportunistic cheating. Like this one was like premeditated. He did it before his games and did it on purpose.
Yeah, and to tack on to what Andy's saying about, maybe he's done it in the past and it calls into question his previous results. The thing that stands out for me is if someone, we talked about Tianyu in I think it was Pro Tour Kaladesh that happened, where there's a public thing where, he angle shot and it worked for him. It was a successful angle shoot. He got the ruling that he wanted, but instantly everyone labeled him as an angle shooter and knew that he was sketchy. When you mark your cards like Yuuya was doing, or Yuuya did, it's very possible he's been doing this for years. And if you don't get caught with marked cards, there's no way anyone will ever know. You could be a successful angle shooter, a successful, you could have a history of doing like sketchy shuffle stuff. And, if someone sees it once and calls a judge and they say, oh, I'll shuffle better or something, then, you get a reputation. A reputation builds up. But with marked cards, if you don't get caught, there's nothing. So I'm really, really worried that, it's just a huge black mark on his entire career, really. It's the same thing when Saito got banned and was removed from the Hall of Fame, or not inducted to Hall of Fame, rather. It's just, sure, it's one isolated event that we know of, but it really does call into question everything that happened in the past. And, it's really not looking good for him. I wish it was better because, I was also a big fan of Yuuya before this, and it's hard to continue to say that.
Got to keep some of the jokes rolling. I hope none of us ever become Andy's favorite player, because that just means we're on that list to be either banned or be found out a cheater.
You heard it here first. Make Andy hate you a little bit.
Just enough.
Enough.
Never be his favorite deck or favorite player.
I don't know if there's an official list anywhere, but I mean, look out Cale Thompson, I guess.
Oh yeah, he's mentioned.
Cale was sitting next to me when I got my match loss. He's next.
Oh, he was close. That's like he was one step over from the piano falling on him.
Yeah.
That could have been him.
He saw me get cut up by the judges. I was sitting there and I like before the judges came over, I like looked at him and he would like sort of gave me like the magic player, like recognized you don't really talk that much look. You know what I'm talking about if you've been doing GP sort of thing. And then he was next to me trying to watch me like not lose my cool while I just got destroyed by the judges. So he might be next. Like he should be happy that I'm the most unlucky person in the world, and everything just gravitates towards me.
The thing on Twitter about Owen is that a lot of people, it might just be a vocal minority, but a lot of tweeters, I guess, want Watsy to issue an official statement or explain everything. And I think when we talked about, well, I asked you guys because I'm never sure about these issues, about whether we deserve an explanation or not, and I feel like the consensus amongst us is that we don't, right, Elliot?
I mean, I think in a perfect world it would be nice to have an explanation, but I think that, at the end of the day, it's a really private matter. I don't think that the people who he harassed, allegedly, really want this drummed up anymore. I believe that what they're saying is true, and I think that, we can wash our hands and be done with Owen Turtenwald. I don't want to say let's cut the segment short and not hear from the other guys, but, I'm kind of over it.
No, I'm with Elliot here. Yeah.
I love the people who are like, they're like, oh, I see that Owen's removed and Autumn's in. Why don't they just give us a statement? They've already figured it out. I don't know what they need this statement for. Like, you know what happened. Why do you need a statement? Like, what is it going to validate to them? I just don't get it.
They come up with a reason that I'm not sure they even believe in. They're like, oh man, it's gonna protect everyone else. I don't know. It's always some reason.
People just want to hear his name dragged through the mud, but like I think we already know that nothing else is gonna, like, he's not gonna accomplish anything else. Like, this was his life. And this is awful. Like, imagine being a platinum pro, you're player of the year, and now you just can't. It's sudden too. And what are you gonna do? What would I do in that position? I don't know. Hope I have some investments. Like, you probably just don't need a statement, right?
Yeah, the unfortunate reality of being a professional Magic player is that you're sort of obligated to have all your eggs in one basket. There's not really a safety net for professional Magic players, and I don't think Watsy's going to make a statement just on the fact that there's maybe legal repercussions for them. Maybe they can't say anything definitive about the allegations against him. So I at this point I really don't expect one. I don't think we'll get one, and I think we can move on from Owen Turtenwald.
I think everyone just secretly just like wants to know more, but it's not their business, and they don't want to say that's the reason, but they just want to know more, right? They want to know more of what's going on, but you're not going to get it, and you don't deserve it, whether you think you do or not.
I agree with that take.
I did see a really funny tweet about this, and it was like, that scene in Enter the Battlefield when I think I can't remember his name, is like asking Owen what would he do without Magic in his life, and he just sort of had this like deadpan look on his face and like looking really confused, looking around, and I was like, that's just Owen now. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
His Twitter account all deleted right now at this point. Let's just move on to War of the Spark. Top 5. Let's review. Who won the first top 5? I forget. Was it Elliot?
You bet it was me. I would never forget that. Defending
champ has one title under his belt, and now we're going to crown the second champion, and it was a runaway winner. And we even put Tarek in there, just in the mix because he was on the show. But Andy, 59%, Tarek, 28%, Elliot, 11%, and Derek with a meager 2% for the top 5.
It's his own vote.
Allegiance.
How did these numbers get crunched?
It's a
Who's
poll.
doing this?
50
Twitter dog.
votes.
What?
Shout out to everyone who voted. And Andy's top 5 picks contains Priest of Forgotten Gods, Wilderness Reclamation, Growth Spiral, Growth Chamber Guardian, and Judith the Scourged Diva. I mean, Andy, what were the misses in your top 5?
Priest of Forgotten Gods and Judith were big old zeros. But I got 3 playable cards, and you guys didn't.
I think Judith feels like Tajik from your other list. It's like, how could this not be played? Type of feeling.
Can you imagine just like you're showing like a new player this card, or like someone a year from now with no context, but like, you see this thing, garbage. It was garbage.
It was totally garbage. Derek also had Judith, and okay, so let's go straight to the top 5. Let's start with the newly crowned champion. What do you got for us? Top 5 War of the Spark constructed cards.
The champ is here. I actually found this to be very hard, and so I messaged Elliot after I had hedged it out, and was like, man, did you find this really hard? He's like, nope. I was like, uh-oh. And then I asked Derek when I got into the hang, I was like, hey, did you find this hard? He's like, nope. I'm like, uh-oh. All right, so I'll start with one that is near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite cards in the set. Is a Blast Zone. So for people who don't know what it does, it is it enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it. XX tap, put X charge counters on Blast Zone. 3 tap, sacrifice Blast Zone. Destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Blast Zone. So this card is just very good in the new Simic Nexus decks, or anything with Wilderness Reclamation, because getting to power out that kind of ability on a land is just extremely powerful. And being able to answer any kind of permanent is just a big slam dunk for that deck. And it also could see other play in other formats. It's a powerful card. Like Engineered Explosives is, I don't know, $100, or at least it used to be. And this thing is obviously quite worse, but it is a land, so the low cost is there. And it doesn't come into play tapped, which I couldn't believe. So like that's a lot of good things going for it. Let's go with the next card, Gideon Blackblade. So Gideon is, as long as it's your turn, Gideon Blackblade, it's a 4/4 human soldier creature with indestructible that's still a planeswalker. And it has abilities. That's not it. Up to 1 target creature you control gains your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Indestructible until end of turn. And its -6 is exile target non-land permanent, and it starts at 4. So it's a 3 mana 4/4, which is already very powerful, and then it also just keeps ticking up, and it's hard to kill. So if you can't manage to kill it, eventually it could also start exiling things. So like for an aggro deck, it's just another super powerful 3-drop that could go in like a hyper aggro mono white decks, or maybe some like slower, more mid-range black white decks, for example. So that's one of my cards. Another one, let's pick Dovin's Veto. So this is one that I'm not sure will be on anyone's list, but it's just blue-white. This spell can't be countered. Counter target non-creature spell. So it's just uncounterable negate. And I think this card is super powerful. Like I see a lot of decks like White Weenie playing it, and having uncounterable counterspell is really good sometimes. And it's like when you're playing a control mirror with this kind of card, it really just, you're like, oh, I've got my counter backup for my thing. You cast it, and the Dovin's Veto it, and you go, well, all right. And you just have to move on. Like you don't get to do anything else. It cannot be countered. And so it's just super powerful card. I think it could get played in like Modern, because some blue-white decks already play negate. This card, if you're playing blue and white and there's no mana issues, is just a lot better than negate. So I could see it being played there as well. All right, next I have Liliana Dreadhorde General. A lot of people agree that this card is ridiculously powerful. And then when I started playing with and against it, I noticed like how really busted it can be when you're trying to interact. And like killing it is sometimes hard because it goes to 7 loyalty. So if you don't have like Vraska's Contempts and have to try and kill it with creatures, it's really tough to do. And if you're playing a heavy creature deck, its -4 is sometimes super devastating. And even if they have like a couple of crappy creatures around, you do get to draw cards out of it because of Liliana's static ability. Whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. So I think this card is just a super powerful Haymaker Planeswalker at the 6-drop slot. And I think that it'll be played a lot in Standard. It might even like have decks built sort of around it, like maybe some control decks that don't make a lot of creatures, right? Don't have a lot of creatures. You can just play this and minus it. And that's a super powerful effect. Just edict 2 of your creatures, and then I have this Planeswalker in play. So I think it's going to be a big win condition in Standard for sure. And last on my list is Saheeli Sublime Artificer. So that's 1 hybrid red-blue, and its static is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. -2, target artifact you control becomes a copy of another target artifact or creature you control until end of turn, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types, and it starts at 5. So in Standard, this card is just like a cheaper Murmuring Mystic, but is like harder to kill sometimes, doesn't get Disdainful Stroked, and often will just get snuck in the early turns. And against aggro decks, you can kind of play it, and 5 loyalty will often survive on turn 3, so then you can just start casting spells and then getting more advantage off of all your spells. And honestly, this could see some play in Modern because of just getting to make tokens along the way is a powerful effect. And if you think of it as an enchantment, it's pretty good. And if you think of it, if you ever get any advantage out of the -2, it is just the card's crazy good. Like I kept thinking of like Is It Drake's, which hasn't been that good of a deck in Standard in a minute, but the -2 here is really good with like the Drake cards. Just getting to have one of your servos turn into an enormous Drake is a huge ability, and I think I could see this card being played in Modern. Artifacts sometimes get busted in Modern, and like having a bunch of spells is really good, and this is kind of a good payoff for all that. So that is the next winning top 5.
Oh, I like it. Elliot, go next.
So I had a couple cards in common with Andy. Pretty much, I don't want to repeat what he said too much. I had Blast Zone and Saheeli on my list. I think they're both like really good tools for the Blast Zone, specifically for the Nexus deck. I think is really good for beating all the hate. Saheeli, I think, is going to sort of replace the 1/5 that makes birds. Just being 1 mana cheaper, I think, is really big. And while the Nexus deck doesn't have anything big to copy, like a Crackling Drake, coming down a turn earlier is like really big for that deck, especially because you have so many powerful 4-drops already. Speaking of powerful 4-drops in the blue-green deck, first new card I'm going to talk about is Tamiyo, Collector of Tales. It's definitely a narrow card. I wouldn't really expect it to see play outside of a Nexus deck, but it's 2 blue-green for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Its static ability is spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard cards or sacrifice permanents. Its +1 is choose a non-land card name, then reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all cards with the chosen name among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And then it has a -3 of return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So really, all 3 of these modes are really relevant for the blue-green deck. The +1 just filters cards super fast, digging towards your, realistically whatever you need, but most of the time it'll be naming Nexus of Fate when you're trying to go infinite. The static ability, you slam this potentially on turn 3, maybe on turn 4. As you're setting up for the late game, maybe you're only going to be going off on turn 6 or something. Any discard spells, which I think are going to be really popular between Duress and Thought Erasure. I think a lot of people are going to be trying to play, like Liliana, Nicol Bolas, some of the more exciting Mythic cards. Shutting those off completely is, I think, really big game. And then, of course, the -3 being Regrowth. It just enables you to beat all the hate cards. You can recur your Blink of an Eye. You can recur your Blast Zone. I think that, this didn't make my list, but I think going forward, the best win condition for the blue-green deck is Commence the Endgame, which is a 6 mana draw 2, amass X, where X is the number of cards in your hand at instant speed. So the fact that you can, maybe discard that early when, it's a little clunkier, but always get it back in the late game, potentially cast it multiple times. I think the -3 is really amazing. You can effectively go infinite, cast either it or Blink of an Eye as many times as you want when you've gotten to the point of the rest of your deck is just Nexus of Fate. So I think it really checks all the boxes for the blue-green deck. And, depending on how things shape up, it's probably a little rough against mono red, but it could be a big contender for next standard. It's definitely what I'm looking towards for the first MCQ that I'm going to be able to play in a couple weeks. My next card is Finale of Promise. This is X red for a sorcery. Lets you cast up to 1 target instant and or sorcery card from your graveyard without paying their mana costs if they cost X or less. And then if X is 10 or more, you copy those spells twice. which, not really what anyone's going to be doing with it. But I think this card's going to be excellent in standard as well as modern. I think, potentially busted in modern. The fact that you can pay 3 mana in the blue-red Phoenix deck, cast like Thought Scour, Faithless Looting is probably your best possibles, but even just Sleight of Hand, Serum Visions, you're casting, or sorry, I guess Sleight of Hand, Thought Scour, or Opt or something, whatever the mix of spells you end up getting. Really importantly, you're casting the spells. You're not copying them, just copying them. It counts towards Arclight Phoenix. If you have a Pyromancer's Ascension online, bordering on Magical Christmas Land, you get to cast 2 Finale of Promises for 4 spells each, 8 spells total of the cantrips left in your graveyard, for 3 or 4 mana. 4 mana, all of a sudden you're casting Manamorphose. I think this card's busted in Phoenix. There's also some implications, you pay red, X is 0, you can cast Restore Balance or Living End from your graveyard. So another angle to the Electro Dominance as Foretold decks. You can play Faithless Looting away or Restore Balance and still cast it. So I think it has some really potential there, and as well as potential in standard, because the modern deck has Manamorphose, which is a free spell, and now we're giving access to a 1-card Bring Back Phoenix in standard. I don't know how many of them you can play. There's no effective way to get rid of them like you have looting in modern if you end up with a couple of them, but being able to top deck this or work your game plan towards this to bring back Phoenix in one shot, I think is a really big game. And then my last card is Narset's Reversal, which I might have been stepping on my own toes hyping up the blue-green deck. This is really potent against Nexus of Fate. It's a blue for an instant. It says counter target instant or sorcery spell, then return it to its owner's hand, and you may choose copy target instant or sorcery spell and return it to its owner's hand. You may choose new targets for the copy. So it's sort of reminiscent of Remand. Pretty big tempo play to be able to bounce their spell. Remand's always draw a card, but Narset's Reversal has a bit of a wider range. Maybe you're countering a lightning strike, killing the creature. Maybe it's a Chemist's Insight in the sort of control mirror or something like that, and you're +2 mana, +2 plus a card kind of thing. So I think this card's really interesting. And of course, there's the dream play of your opponent casts Nexus of Fate in your end step or on their turn, and you Narset's Reversal it. You end up with 2 turns in a row, and that's probably game ending if you're a proactive deck. And if you're a reactive deck, maybe this isn't the card for you necessarily. If you're like Esper Control, maybe you'd rather just hard counter. But a blue-green mirror could definitely be decided by a single Narset's Reversal. If you're playing maybe Phoenix, maybe you have the hour plus Reversal, you've cast your 3 spells for just 3 mana, something the Phoenix deck has trouble with, and now you have Narset's Reversal up, and the blue-green deck can't win. So I think it's a little more flexible than I'm maybe giving it credit here for. I think we'll see play outside of strictly for the blue-green deck, but I think it's really powerful. So that's my 5, and I really let people down last set. I'm ready to take back the crown though.
All right, now Derek, are you going to get more than 2% of votes this time? What's your 5, or is it any different?
I probably won't get more than 2%. I'm pretty sure all the viewers hate me, but that's okay. My 5 are Tamiyo, because I think it's really good in the blue-green Nexus deck, specifically against cards like Duress. I think that Tamiyo is one of the only cards in that deck that I'm worried about. As somebody who probably won't be playing the Nexus deck, I feel like you're trying to beat the Tamiyo more than you're trying to beat the rest of the deck. The Tamiyo is the glue that holds the deck together. I have Ugin, because I think Ugin is one of your better top ends. It draws cards and kills any permanent that has a color. So I think that's just very powerful effect, and it slots into any deck. I have Liliana. So I think Liliana is also very powerful. Also creates card advantage. Might be very similar to Vraska Relic Seeker, but we will see. I'm unsure on where the power level of that card is, how different it is from Vraska, but I think it is better enough that it will see more play. And then I have 3 mana Teferi. I think a lot of people don't really understand how powerful the 3 mana Teferi is as a mid-range, either Esper or blue-white card. It simply just shuts down the entire Nexus deck from operating the way that Nexus wants to operate, similar to the way that you have to answer Tamiyo before you can duress them. You have to beat a Teferi before you can cast your spells at instant speed. I think a lot of people are really sleeping on that effect. And then my 5th and final card is one that hasn't been mentioned yet. It's D-Spark. I think that card is a good answer to every other threat that we've talked about in the format so far, whether it be Planeswalkers or Wilderness Reclamation. And the fact that it is white and black means that it can be played in Esper, or it can be played in like a white-black mid-range deck if that ever shows up, or even splashed in an Abzan deck. So that is my top 5. 4 of them are Planeswalkers, because I think the Planeswalkers are really good. But yeah, we'll see who wins this one, I guess.
I got John, who really wanted to be here to give his top 5. I got his quick top 5. Shares a lot with some of you. At 5, he's got Ugin the Infallible. Modern, potential bridge at 6 for Tron when Wormcoil is no good in the meta. Bridges towards your 7 to 8s in post-board games. Legacy, Eldrazi Post Stompy as a bridge top end. At number 4, he's got Narset, part of Veils, mostly Legacy, Miracles, Stoneblade, blue mid-range control, Vintage as anti-Xerox. At number 3, he's got Teferi, Time Raveler, as Derek does. Modern, traditional blue-white X control versus control mirrors can also spawn Esper decks with upkeep discards. In Legacy, Miracles, Esper Stoneblade, potentially combo with Splash Disc. And number 2, he's got Neoform, potentially extremely abusable, already spawning turn 1/2 kills. Archetypes like Green Shulbrand, 2 mana for this effect is worth the build around. And at number 1, Karn the Great Creator, true multi-format all-star. Modern for Tron as a slightly differently built build with the sideboard bullet package, Word Prison, Legacy, and Steel Stompy, Painter, Eldrazi Post, potential in Vintage. That, my man, is the Underground Kings top 5. And this will be his first entry in the top 5 competition. I wish him luck with Andy, defending champion. And with that, we are heading closer and closer to one of the first MCQs, especially the first one that we are hosting here at Face to Face Games Montreal, May 11th at the Sheraton. Definitely register. I'm not sure how many seats are left, but if there's still room, definitely register as soon as possible. I think Andy and Derek, if I'm not mistaken, you guys were battling today on the standard battlefield. Am I wrong, Andy?
Well, I've been playing like a ton of Standard on Magic Online and Arena, and me and Derek actually ended up playing, and I can't really recall who won, but all I know is that I took a lot of turns, and Derek complained that I got lucky.
You had 3 Wilderness Reclamations in game 3. You had
5 in that game.
Yeah,
he didn't put them in his deck not to draw them.
Oh,
you had it coming.
Oh my god!
Well, you drew Llanowar Elf. Get out of town.
I sideboard those out. I'm pretty sure.
Well, you played one on turn 1, buddy.
Well, then I don't know what to tell you.
I don't remember, but everything's luck.
You've even showed up to the right table this time, Derek, and things still didn't go your way.
Andy, what's the starting point you think for people right now? Week 0, is people prepping for May 11th?
Well, and I'm back on my garbage again, and I'm just playing a lot of Simic Nexus. I think Tamiyo is so good in the deck; it's crazy, and Blast Zone is also a huge addition to the deck. And now the deck is in a position with Commence the Endgame that it doesn't need any other win conditions except for 1 Commence the Endgame.
That sounds pretty convincing. What about you, Derek? What's week 0 like?
I'm just playing green-black. Range.
As expected.
Yeah,
both back on our garbage.
Yeah, and I think as long as people are doing dirtily things, green-black's fine. You just have to Like, it still beats mono red. It still beats control a good amount of the time. And as soon as I figure out how to beat Nexus, I'm sure it won't be an issue anymore. Tamiyo is annoying, though. Tamiyo is very annoying.
I love your thinking though, that like the cards are here, like the pieces of the puzzle. You just got to figure out the green black answer.
Everything's just a jigsaw puzzle, and you just have to find the best mid-range deck to beat the jigsaw puzzle.
Elliot, what's your week 0 thought? I assume you're going to play May 11th?
Yeah, for sure. I'm already signed up, as people should. Spots are closing up, I'm sure. The only matches of Magic I've played with in this standard format have been with blue-green. Kind of agree with Andy. We tend to test a lot together. I think the deck's pretty busted for at least the week 0 deck. Maybe things will change in the week and a half we have before the tournament. I also keep getting distracted by people messaging me like Bolus's Citadel decks, and I keep like wanting to do that with a Wild Growth Walker, just casting all my Explore creatures. But I think I hopefully have the power to resist. I think there's a lot of like really sweet things you can be doing in Standard right now. Bolus's Citadel, not the least of them. I think Feather the Redeemed is also kind of cool, sweet deck you can be playing. But it's looking like a Simic Nexus from me.
Alrighty. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us live on the show on YouTube. Shout out to all of you in there. If you like the show, smash that subscribe to Face to Face Games YouTube channel as we look towards adding more and more content in the coming year. Hit that like button, and if you want to support us, go to patreon.com/firststrike, or just tweet out that you like an episode, subscribe to us on Anchor. Like, any of the free stuff actually helps. It's not something that we just say. Like, if you just subscribe to our podcast on your favorite Android or iOS app, it's a huge help. And with that, we will see you guys next week with some hopefully more awesome news. We'll talk about we'll dive into more about like the new M20 changes, how you can now host pre-releases on Fridays, stuff like that, stuff we didn't get a chance to cover on this show. And hopefully we got more testing from these guys, especially Andy and Derek, putting in the grind there on Arena. And I might drop in. I might play May 11th, so I might be finally getting my feet wet as well. So with that, for the guys, we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.